Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala sayyidina Mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So alhamdulillah, in our journey through development of good akhlaq, so we're talking about the detriments of speech, afat al-lisan. So we talked about a few things. Let's go back. We talked about useless speech. We talked about batil. We talked about mala yani. And today we're going to talk about takalluf al-kalam, tashadduq. So exaggerated, ostentatious speech. So عن جابر رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن من أحبكم إلي أقرب مني مجلس يوم القيامة أحسنهم أخلاقا وأن أبغضهم إلي أبعدهم مني يوم القيامة الثرثارون والمتشدقون والمتفيهقون. So Jabir radiallahu ta'ala narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we've narrated this hadith on several occasions previously, the dearest and closest of you to me on the day of Qiyamah, the day of resurrection, will be those with the best of behavior, best of akhlaq. And the most hateful and farthest from me on the day of Qiyamah, in one narration, the opposite is mentioned. Those who have bad akhlaq will be the farthest away. Here, it just mentions that the farthest away from me on the day of judgment will be the talkative. Right? And thartharun. It doesn't mean just talkative, just going on talking, and they love to talk, and they just on and on and on and on. And usually people who talk a lot, they make a lot of slips. It's said that a person doesn't slip so much and so awfully with his feet as he does with his tongue. Someone who is talking all the time, it's going to be disastrous for him, and it's going to be a severe annoyance and detrimental for others around him. And then mutashaddiqun, the most pretensions, and this is where we're talking exaggerated, ostentatious speech. So, someone really makes an effort to really show that he's very eloquent and he's very intelligent, very eloquent. In other words, showing off with very ostentatious speech, right? And this doesn't include, in the public speakers, particularly the khutbah, people who are, that's their job. Their job is to, have an impact on people. So, Nabi Islam was the most impactful and the most fasih and baligh. But again, exaggeration, going over the limits, getting too carried away with it. So he said, so what's the limits? So that limit is understood what we say by dhawq as-salim. Person who has, has good taste, it's understood. I mean, this is natural, it's free-flowing, or this is really a takalluf. Nabi Islam mentions, أَنَا وَأَتْقِيَ أُمَّتِي بُرْعَى مِنَ التَّكَلُّفِ. Myself and the muttaqis of my ummah, we are free from this, exaggeration and overdoing it. It's not what Islam is about moderation. Okay. And then, mutafayhiqun. Mutafayhiqun, it's also very similar to mutashaddiqun, that using their rhetoric and their ability to really, impress with speech. So this was, in the everyday speech and, in the common discussion, dialogue, people absolutely really impressed. So in other words, it's a kind of riyah, it's a kind of showing, So obviously, this is something that we need to be cognizant of, particularly those who have been gifted with the gift of gab, as it were. So if that's used in the right place, without exaggeration, without ostentation, without riyah and sumah, and these type of things, then that's a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If used in its proper place, it's a tremendous tool. Sayyidina Hassan radiallahu ta'ala was a great poet and a great, fasih and baligh, and that talent was used as a weapon against the mushrikeen, against the polytheists. The Prophet used to make dua for him, and he said, stand up and reply to them, and you are being helped by the Ruh al-Qudus. Jibreel alayhi salam is helping you. Allahu Akbar. So, used in its place, it's a great ni'mah, but out of its place, it's a ni'mah. It's a disaster. Allah help us. Second, or this is number 4 of these various detriments that Ghazali mentioned. So vulgarity, harsh. عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس المؤمن بالطعان ولا اللعان ولا الفاحش ولا البذيء. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala, he says, he reports that Messenger of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a true believer, mu'min, is not involved in taunting, ta'an, poking fun at people and, bringing out their faults and not la'an. He doesn't go around cursing everybody. He doesn't do that. He doesn't curse anyone, One of my teachers in Makkah, he said, you're not going to be held accountable, if you don't curse anyone, even if you don't curse shaitan, you're not going to be, it's not like committing a sin. Satan is no doubt cursed. There's no question about that. What is that you don't have to go around cursing people. If Allah has cursed someone, then they're cursed. We don't need to add to that situation. There's a dua, that of Nabi Islam, it may not be a very strongly narrated, but still it's mentioned in books of dua. That Nabi used to say that, oh Allah, whoever I have made, whoever you intend, good for, then my intention of good for him be as well. And for those whom you have cursed, then I also will curse them as well. So in any case, the mu'min, he's very far from cursing people. And by the way, if we curse somebody and they're not befitting of that curse, then what happens? It comes back on us. Just like a person who calls somebody a name that they don't deserve, then it comes back on them. Even to the extent that someone says, Ya kafir, were you kafir? And he's not, it comes back on him. It's very serious. So again, think before we speak. Allah give me and Allah still. Okay, and then 5, and this is actually what the discussion is here, is vulgarity, fuhsh. And he doesn't talk indecent things, indecency. And that's become, the norm. As a matter of fact, now, these words that have become common, when I was a kid, no one would ever mention these kind of things here in America. And now, this has become, common talk. So my mother, she's not Muslim, but she's a person of, she has ethics and morals from the old school. If we spoke any kind of word, she said, I don't want to hear toilet talk in my house. So she would take us and wash out our mouth with soap, we said anything. So we as Muslims, nothing should come out of our tongue except goodness. The best of people who are benefit to people. So anything that comes out of our tongue, it should be benefit. And if it's not beneficial, keep quiet. Sakat salim, as we mentioned. And then lastly, he doesn't abuse people. He doesn't talk nasty. In other words, summary is he doesn't speak anything which is blameworthy, anything which is, untasteful. Everything that he says, he hopes that it's going to be in, as we say, mizan al-hasanat. It's going to be in the weight of his good deeds. So that means we have to be cognizant of what we say. And secondly, as we mentioned from the very inception of this particular chapter, speech should be quite limited. And our Nabi also was very limited in his speech. Joking. Okay, what's wrong with that? Well, there could be a lot wrong with it. Because often it produces, even though unintentionally, malice, rancor, ill feelings. Because joking generally, people tell jokes generally in what? You're telling a funny story that has a moral or something. Usually joking is, actually it's, making fun of others. That's what most of joking is all about. All these professional comedians, that's what they do. You have millionaires that they basically making fun of others and acting funny. This is more of the behavior of monkeys than human beings. Imam Ghazali says an interesting thing. He says, if you don't work on the angelic nature of the human being, that angelic nature is not worked upon, then what happens is the man, rather than ascending towards higher levels and stages of humanity, he goes on descending into lower levels of animalism, and then ultimately Satanism. For example, if the human being is not, has an objective in front of him and he's working towards it, then what happens? This objective becomes what we see in most of the people in the world. What am I going to eat tonight? We Muslims, are we, what are we going to have for iftar tonight? Let us check our pulses, So he says, just like, the cows and the sheep, they go out in the morning, they graze, they fill their bellies, they come back to sleep. So if that's all that we're concerned about is going out, earning a living and filling our bellies and going to sleep, then what's the difference between us and cows? So people are non-cognizant of their purpose and just, their purpose has descended from a human purpose to an animal purpose, like the cows and sheep. However, cows and sheep, they don't go any lower than that. They are what they are. That's why Allah made them. They don't try to infringe on the grazing of others. Just don't bother you. They higher objective. However, you've got as we say in Arabic, al-hayawanat al-muftarisa. Predators, thank you. Predators. So what they do is they don't just eat what's in their share, they go after others. They might eat you even. So that's also what happens to human beings. They were like cows, and then their stomachs keep on expanding, and then they start acting like lions, tigers, cheetahs. We have a lot of those on. But then again, lions and tigers, once their belly is full, they're okay. However, you've got another even lower category of animals, like scorpions and snakes. Scorpions that comes along and stings you while you're sleeping, or bites you while you're sleeping, for the fun of it. He's not getting anything out of it. That's just his nature. He likes to harm you. So we have people that are like that, right? And then, so he's mentioned those four categories, But I would add another category, because we've got these professional comedians, so they're just like monkeys. Monkey, what does he do? If you see monkeys in the cage, they just do all kinds of antics to get you to laugh, and then they really enjoy that. So are we animals or are we human beings? If we're human beings, then we have higher objectives. We're not here just to play games and tell jokes and make a laugh out of life. It's not a joke, it's serious. We have one life and we have one opportunity to prepare for the eternity. And we're not going to do that by spending our time joking. It also, and as I said, because most of the time this joking is about, making fun of others. So what happens? You get rancor, malice, ill feelings, Oh, I didn't mean I was just joking. Well, why? but you offended the person. And sometimes that joke, it ends up into a fight. Sometimes it ends up into a murder. It ends up in shedding of blood over a joke. So, we need to be careful about that. Creates hatred and resentment. And he said that about me. I was joking. No, he meant that. Right? We've all seen this. It happens, And it also negates dignity, sobriety, the waqar as it. So a Muslim is supposed to have, he's supposed to have a kind of dignity that he carries himself in. So always joking and always, making fun of everything and everyone says absolutely was going to negate that. And mudhib lil waqar, as it said in English. So therefore, constant joking is prohibited. Okay, somebody's going to tell me, maybe this also is a joke. That's true. So let's look into that. The Prophet used to tell jokes all the time, consistently, or it was a rarity on certain occasions. It was on certain occasions. Number one, it was truth. He said, so he wouldn't say except something that was truthful. And it wouldn't be humiliating to others. It wouldn't be a ta'an, it wouldn't be making fun or, showing weaknesses of others. It was just to lighten up the mood, when that was necessary. And it was generally with his womenfolk, his own family members, and people who were very close to him. And it was a means of, lightening up their hearts. Perhaps someone was tense or stressed or in a mood. So this was one, perhaps look into that and lighten up that mood and bring joy and happiness into the heart of that person, which is a good deed. It's a righteous action. Okay? So, and again, occasionally, it doesn't mean that he would take precedence, So, as we say, la hukm lil-nadir, in the principles of fiqh, an exceptional case, we don't build, a law or a ruling or a precedent upon, exceptions. So this would be exception. Otherwise, Nabi Sallallahu was in the most dignified manner all of the time. Even in his joking, it was a very dignified form of joking, And so, so we also can joke, that's also part of in tadris. Our Shaykh Muhammad Ali Sabuni, he was a person of waqar, he was a person of, haiba. But he had a very present sense of humor. But it was always a very pleasant sense of humor, a dignified sense of humor. So our teachers, our great teachers, they had a sense of humor. But it was of a dignified, And maybe this was him would say, yeah, with the name, oh, you with the 2 ears. Everybody has 2 ears. So it's just, And he would say things like this, he went behind one of it and caught a hold of one of the freed slaves that he used to love very much. Okay, I've taken you. Said, okay, I'm yours. And so he was just, that was putting joy and happiness in the heart of the person that he was, being joking with, or as we say, mazah. So it's not the kind of joking that we usually hear. And, unfortunately, people think this is a sign of being clever. People come in and just start, particularly in some cultures, I won't mention, people would identify their own, if they happen to be from, there's certain cultures where that's the norm. As soon as we meet somebody, we start, taunting him. Like that's the cultural norm. That's what we do. That's, it's not what we do. We're Muslims. Our culture is Islam. Above and beyond and predicating all other cultural aspects wherever we might be from. Right? So that's an issue. Some cultures are more embedded into that kind of thing than others. In any case, all of us are probably guilty, myself included. So we need to really take account of ourselves in that. This is really something that we need to not be about. And in fact, we're not to be taunting and and being derogatory even to non-Muslims, even our enemies. So, let alone, people of our own faith. And then mockery, derision, which is an offshoot of just what we were talking about. In this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned many things. And also, Nabi Sallallahu. So this in Surah Hujurat is quite sufficient. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتوب فأولئك هم الظالمون. O you who believe, let not some men. Now this is interesting because here men and women are both mentioned. Usually it's just a general, when the men are mentioned, the women, they're included in that. But here, men are mentioned and women as well, because this happens a lot in women. I'll attest to that. So, O you who believe, let not the men among you laugh at others, scorn at others, mock at others. It may be that the latter, the one who's being mocked, is better than the one who's mocking. Okay? Nor let some women laugh at others, scorn, mock at others. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Those who are mocking, or those who are mocked at, it very well may be that they're better than those who are mocking at them. Nor defame nor one another, nor be sarcastic to one another. We really have this problem being sarcastic. Nor call each other by offensive names. Also, in some cultures, this is the norm, They give people these weird nicknames. It's not Islam. Don't call people by offensive nicknames. Some people used to know by a particular name, or we call it laqab in Arabic, which was not offensive, but it has something was specific to it. For example, Abu Bakr, we call him Amir al-Mu'mineen. It's also a laqab. This is, if you will, a nickname. It's proper and a very honorable nickname. Something like that. Saifullah, Khalid, he was called Sword of Allah. That's a nickname. What kind of a nickname? Right. So offensive nicknames, this is what is being mentioned here. Ill-seeming is the name. This is very difficult to translate because it's not, you don't have a usage like this in English. In other words, the name of fisq, of evilness. And if we are engaging in these activities, we deserve that name, rather than deserving the name of mu'min, Muslim, because a mu'min is the one who someone is in aman. There's security from any kind of derision or any kind of detriment from us. And a Muslim is the one who salim al-nas min yadihi wa lisani. People are safe from his tongue and his hand. So if we're going around taunting people, deriding people, mocking at people, so do we really deserve the name of mu'min, or do we deserve the name of fasiq? The evil one. That's a terrible thing to be called after we have accepted Iman and we have been called Muslims and Mu'mins. And so therefore, those who do not desist, repent, lam yatub. Repent means, sorry for what we did, we stop doing what we're doing, and we make amends. And we don't do it anymore. So that's mockery, derision, making fun of people. So it's basically looking down on others, scorning and disdain, pointing out the false weaknesses just to make other people laugh. And, mind you, it may be in various ways. Sometimes it's direct, you make a direct joke and it's a very direct, blunt statement, but sometimes it's just, this also happens. Somebody maybe has a defect, or they have a weakness, or, they said something kind of untoward, whatever. So somebody, mocks them by imitating them. Maybe talks like he talks, or made an action and kind of imitating them. And what's the meaning of that? The meaning of that is deriding them. And again, these comedians get paid big money to do that. We sit back and we watch that and laugh. We shouldn't be engaging. We shouldn't be watching stuff. We shouldn't approve of that. We have nothing to do with that. So it might be like that, imitation. It also might be an allusion. We don't really say it directly, but we allude to something that actually is it's a kind of mockery of the person. So anyway, the whole point is that we have to be very careful in what we say. And you could say the summary of it is nothing should come out of our tongues except what's honorable, and and we would like to be called, as they say, do unto others as you would have done unto you. لا يحب أحدكم لا يكون لا يكون أحدكم مؤمن حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. So you can't be a real mu'min until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. So anything that I'm going to say for somebody else, I should say, would I like them to say that for me? Would I be honored by saying that? Would I be happy? Would I be okay with that? Then fine. Otherwise, no need of saying it. We don't need to be, known as we're clever, we're smart, with the life of the party and stuff like that. Okay. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, all of these things are forbidden, as the Quran, as the Surah Hujurat has told us, and what is being relayed to us, that obviously this is totally forbidden. Quran and Sunnah, who does so is committing a very heinous sin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq and give us the ability to guard our tongues this Ramadan. This fasting month is one of the great exercises to teach us of control. So one of the aspects of fasting is fasting with our tongues, containing our speech, containing our anger, etc. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. Wa jazakumullah khair. Any questions, any comments? No? Yeah.
You were saying that it's not okay or forbidden to mock other people, use bad words. However, nowadays in this culture, it is kind of norm.
That's what I'm saying.
So, and if you don't participate, then you're looked at as a party pooper.
Well, that's fine.
So,
That's fine. That's fine.
or if you tell somebody that even a Muslim, like, don't do this. This is not a good behavior. Then they say, I'm just joking. Or how do you
Well, just what you heard today, if you can, and again, when we advise people, we have to include ourselves. Look, we were doing these kind of things, but this is really not good. So we put it with love and affection. And it's not like we're catching somebody or, coming down on somebody or accosting somebody when we give them advice, but rather it should feel like, we're giving, we really would like to give some sincere advice out of love and affection for our brothers and sisters. And, put it as nicely as you can, if you will, a sugar-coated pill. So what we talked about here, we have these ayats of Quran, we have the hadith, and this is our way of life. So we would be much better off if we follow that and try to be, considered clever in the eyes of the public. Because at the end of the day, I'm not accountable to the public. Nobody's accountable to the public. And the public is not going to help me also, ultimately. They're not going to bring detriment to me, they're not going to bring benefit to me. It's Allah also. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, says, I'm unhappy with you, that's what we should be worried about. Whether the public is happy or not, we don't unnecessarily want them to be unhappy, but if they have to be unhappy at the expense, or to make them happy at the expense of the unhappiness of our Creator, sorry. لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. That's the golden rule. There's no obedience to the people or the creation in disobedience to the Creator. So we put it as nice as we can to the people, make dua that will open the hearts and minds to accept it, and if they do, that's fine. And if not, and if you're quite certain that they're not going to accept it, then, as we know from Hadith, that if we are in Quran itself, we're involved in speech which is not suitable and appropriate, if we can't change it, then we get up and we leave. Excuse me, I have an appointment. Appointment with what? Appointment with something which is better than this. But we don't stay there. We don't stay in these gatherings. We try to avoid these gatherings. And I know, yes, it's very difficult. And as I mentioned, and that's what you're alluding to, that there are various cultures and various circles and certain cultures. It's very prominent. I'm fully aware of that. So we would do well probably to minimize, as they say in time management, this is what we call the Q3, it's the kind of situation where, yeah, we have to socialize with people now and again, but we have to minimize it, filter it to the extent that, to the extent that we have to. But if it's not a social gathering among the righteous and the pious, where righteousness and piety is being exercised and being absorbed, so this is not the kind of place we want to spend our time in the first place. Does that help out at all? I'll make it easy. Yeah. Yes.
You made a comment, but you said that we should even avoid doing this type of stuff with non-Muslims. Like the best example that I can think of that we can all relate to is that, like, let's say Trump. Everybody made fun of Trump like to the highest extent. Like we should even avoid that.
I mean, what's the point? I mean, is this really? I mean, so if he's wrong on something, then offer your opinion. The model of that. Those who know the Arabic language. There's the compilation of Sahih Muslim, which is a very famous compilation of hadith, and a very famous commentary of that book is written by Imam Nawawi, the author of Riyadh al-Salihin. Now, in that book, which is a commentary, volumes like this, okay, you will not find a single incident in that book, at least I haven't seen, where he mentions anyone, because here we're talking about differences of opinion and so much differences of opinion, and sometimes dealing with differences of opinion which are absolutely, unacceptable. And even some of the, extremely deviated or devious, parties or individuals or groups. But he will never use derogatory. He will explain what is right, and he will bring out, where he feels is wrong or what is incorrect, in the most, honorable language, and that's all that's necessary. Why do we have to, stick the guy, poke fun? What's the point? And what does that say about us? So we're actually probably not hurting him at all, but we would probably be hurting ourselves, And we're all guilty of that myself. Excuse us. But actually, in reality, it's not going to do any good. And moreover, we would do well to keep our own dignity, even when other people are being indignant or dishonorable to us. So we keep our own dignity and we don't exercise our own dignity with everyone, even if it means, being opposed to them, even if they're fighting with them. We need to keep our dignity. Is that clear? And that would also be impactful. People say these Muslims, even the people they don't disagree with, they don't make fun of them, they don't deride them, they don't jump on in their case and get up in their face and all that kind of thing, So that's going to, be a big plus. We're the ambassadors of our religion, right? So from bad mouthing, the politicians and everybody else like everybody else, and what's the difference between us and them? So we should be that example of exemplary, behavior, dealing with everyone. So Allah give us all tawfiq. Anything else? Yeah.
Is there any virtue in calling good names to each other? Nice names, funny names that a person would be happy when they hear it?
Well, let's put it this way. You will get reward for bringing any kind of happiness to another Muslim. Right? To any human being, as a matter of fact. Kindness and goodness is always rewarded. If the intention and the impact is actually goodness, in reality it is a goodness. Yes. Okay. Anything else? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله